She is a prisoner, traded between violent hands, her hope a dying ember in the vast, unforgiving plains. Then, a shadow moves, a Lakota scout, offering not chains, but a desperate flight. Yet, the most dangerous pursuit is yet to come, from the very men sent by her own father. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe survival can lead to love, hit like and subscribe for more. Her fear of the unknown is a torment, but the familiar threat wears a face she once trusted. Could a silent warrior teach her the true meaning of sanctuary, when her own blood hunted her? The world swam back into focus through a haze of pain and dust. Elara lay sprawled on the hard-packed earth, the coppery taste of blood sharp in her mouth. Her wrists ached from bindings recently severed, the raw skin a testament to the brutality she had endured. Before her, a man stood silhouetted against the harsh glare of the sun, tall, lean, his features unreadable in the shadows cast by a wide-brimmed hat that looked out of place with the rest of his attire. He was not one of the outlaws. Their bodies, 3 of them, lay still and grotesque a short distance away, silent victims of the swift, lethal force that had, improbably, rescued her. This new man, this Lakota, was the source of that force. He had moved like a phantom, a whisper of death in the chaotic aftermath of her captor's drunken squabble. Now, he simply watched her, his dark eyes holding no discernible emotion. Fear, cold and sharp, lanced through Elara, overriding the dull throb of her abused body. She had been passed from one horror to another, it seemed. He made no move to approach, merely held out a water skin. His gesture was economical, almost impatient. Thirst clawed at her throat, a living thing. She scrabbled backward, a choked sound escaping her lips. He didn't pursue, just lowered the water skin slightly, his gaze unwavering. The silence stretched, broken only by the whine of the wind across the desolate land and her own ragged breathing. Her mind, fractured by days of terror, saw only another captor, another threat in a different guise. He set the water skin on the ground, a few feet from her, then turned and walked a short distance to retrieve a horse, not one of the outlaws' mounts, but a sturdy, intelligent-looking paint. He returned, leading it, and with a grunt, hefted a small pack from its back. From it, he took a strip of dried meat. This, too, he placed near the water skin. Then he busied himself with his horse, checking its hooves, adjusting its tack, pointedly ignoring her. The sun beat down, merciless. The smell of blood and death hung heavy. Elara's body screamed for water, for sustenance, but her terror held her captive. The outlaws, their leering faces, their cruel laughter, the constant, grinding fear. It had hollowed her out, leaving only a raw, animal instinct to survive. But how? This man, this stranger, held all the power here. Slowly, agonizingly, she crawled towards the water. Each movement sent jolts of pain through her bruised ribs and twisted ankle. She reached the water skin, her hand trembling so violently she could barely grasp it. She drank, shallow, desperate gulps, the cool liquid a balm to her parched throat. Then, the meat. It was tough, salty, but it was food. Energy she desperately needed. He watched her, she knew, though he didn't turn. When she had finished, he approached, not with menace, but with a quiet purpose. He gestured to the horse, then to her. The meaning was clear. They were leaving. He offered no hand, no soft words, just an expectation. He had saved her from one group, but for what purpose? Her mind, still mired in the teachings of her upbringing, whispered warnings about savages, about dangers untold. Yet, the alternative, to be left here with the dead, to face the wilderness alone, was unthinkable. He lifted her onto the horse with an unexpected gentleness that belied his rugged appearance. The movement sent a fresh wave of agony through her, and a small cry escaped her lips. His expression didn't change. He mounted his own horse, took the reins of hers, and set them moving, away from the grim scene, heading deeper into the vast, indifferent landscape. Days blurred into a rhythm of relentless travel. The Lakota, Kanji, as she hesitantly learned his name when he spoke at once, gutturally, in response to a pointed look from her, rarely spoke. He moved with an efficiency that was both awe-inspiring and intimidating. He found water where Elara saw only parched earth, identified edible roots she would have ignored, and moved through the treacherous terrain as if born to it. He shared his meager rations without comment, tended the small fire at night with an economy of motion, and always, kept watch. Her fear of him began to erode, slowly, replaced by a grudging respect, then a hesitant reliance. He had opportunities to harm her, to abandon her, yet he did not. He treated her with a distant courtesy, a profound lack of personal interest that was, in its own way, a comfort. He was a presence, a shield against the wilderness, and increasingly, against the phantoms of her past. He tended to her twisted ankle with rough, skilled hands, binding it with strips of hide and a poultice of crushed leaves that smelled of the earth. His touch was impersonal, practical, yet it was the first human contact in so long that hadn't been steeped in violence or degradation. One evening, as a chill wind whipped across the plains, presaging a storm, he guided them to a shallow overhang of rock, barely a cave. The space was cramped, forcing them into a proximity that made Elara's skin prickle with a renewed awareness of him, not as a savage, but as a man. The storm broke with fury, rain lashing down, thunder echoing like the cannons of a distant war. Elara shivered, despite the small fire Kenji managed to coax to life in the sheltered space. A tremor ran through her, not entirely from cold. She was still weak, the ordeal having taken a toll deeper than just bruises and sprains. Kenji looked at her, then silently draped his own worn blanket over her shoulders. It smelled of smoke, leather, and him. The gesture was so unexpected, so uncharacteristically solicitous, that tears pricked her eyes. He turned away, staring out at the raging storm, offering her the privacy of her emotion. In that moment, a small, fragile seed of trust began to sprout in the barren soil of her fear. She saw the lines of weariness etched around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. He was not immune to the hardship, yet he bore it with a stoic grace. The following day, under a washed-clean sky, Kenji's demeanor changed. His vigilance, always present, sharpened to a knife's edge. He paused frequently, scanning their back trail, his head cocked as if listening to secrets carried on the wind. Elara, following his gaze, saw them too, eventually, distant riders, moving with a disciplined purpose that spoke not of opportunistic outlaws, but of organized men. Her heart plummeted. More pursuit. Kenji urged their horses to a faster pace, his silence now charged with a grim urgency. They rode hard, the brief respite of the storm forgotten. Elara clung on, her earlier fatigue replaced by a new, more specific terror. Who were these men? Why were they being hunted? A few days later, Kenji brought down a small deer with a single, perfectly aimed arrow. As he began to butcher it with swift, practiced movements, Elara noticed him pause, examining the earth nearby. He picked something up, something small and glinting. An arrowhead, but not of his making. It was metal, cruelly barbed. He showed it to her, his expression grim. It meant nothing to her, until later that day, they found a spent rifle cartridge near a hastily abandoned campsite. The casing bore a small, distinctive mark, a tiny embossed crest. Elara's blood ran cold. She knew that crest. It was her father's. The realization struck her with the force of a physical blow. Her father. His men. Hunting her. Not rescuing her, but hunting her. Why? The question echoed in the desolate chambers of her mind. Was her shame at being kidnapped so great that he would rather see her dead, or dragged back like a runaway animal by his hired guns? Or was it something more sinister? Her father was a man of immense wealth and rigid pride, a man who valued control above all else. Her abduction would have been an affront to that control, her rescue by a Lakota man an intolerable complication. Kenji watched her, his dark eyes missing nothing of her dawning horror and betrayal. He said nothing, but his gaze softened almost imperceptibly. He had known, or suspected, all along. The pursuit intensified. Her father's men were skilled trackers, relentless. They were driven by the promise of her father's gold, or perhaps by fear of his wrath. Kanji pushed them both to the limits of endurance, his knowledge of the terrain their only advantage. Elara, no longer a passive burden, found a strength she hadn't known she possessed. She helped gather firewood, learned to identify edible berries under his terse guidance, kept watch while he allowed himself brief moments of rest. She started to read the subtle signs of the land, to understand the language of his silent gestures. A fragile partnership formed in the crucible of their shared danger. One afternoon, as they navigated a narrow, rocky canyon, the hunters nearly caught them. A volley of rifle fire echoed from the rim above, bullets pinging off the rocks around them. One of her father's men, a brutish fellow named Silas whom she vaguely remembered from the estate, shouted her name. "Elara! Your father wants you back. Come out, and the Indian won't be harmed further." Further? The implication was clear. They saw Kanji not as a rescuer, but as another captor, or worse, an obstacle to be eliminated. The hypocrisy was staggering. Her father, who had never shown her true warmth, only a possessive control, now sent men to save her by threatening the one person who had shown her genuine, selfless protection. Kanji pulled her behind a large boulder, his body shielding hers. He drew his knife, his face a mask of fierce determination. He would fight. For her. This man, this savage her father would despise, was willing to die for her. In that moment, something within Elara snapped. The last vestiges of her old life, her loyalty to a father who clearly valued his reputation or his authority over her very life, crumbled to dust. She looked at Kanji, at the raw courage in his eyes, the unwavering resolve. He was not her enemy. He was her sanctuary. "Silas," she screamed, her voice raw but surprisingly strong. "Tell my father I am not his property. I will not go back." A stunned silence followed, broken only by the wind whistling through the canyon. Then Silas's voice, angrier now. "Don't be a fool, girl. He's a savage. He'll turn on you. He saved me." Elara retorted, her gaze locked with Kanji's. "When your kind left me for dead or worse. He has shown me more honor than my father ever did." Kanji's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise, then something deeper, a profound acknowledgement. He gave a short, sharp nod. The stalemate was broken by another barrage of shots. Kanji pushed her lower, then, seizing a momentary lull, he grabbed her hand. "Run," he grunted, pulling her towards a narrow fissure in the rock face she hadn't noticed before. It was barely wide enough to squeeze through. He shoved her forward, then followed, his movements agile and sure. They scrambled through the tight passage, emerging into a smaller, hidden ravine. Behind them, they could hear the frustrated shouts of Silas and his men. They had bought themselves time, but they were not yet safe. Kanji was limping slightly, a ricocheting piece of rock had caught his leg. They found a defensible alcove high on the ravine wall as dusk began to settle. Kanji tended to his leg, hissing softly as he cleaned the gash. Elara watched him, her heart aching with a mixture of fear, gratitude, and a burgeoning emotion she dared not name. The immediate threat had been evaded, for now. The larger men, her father's men, were still out there. But something fundamental had shifted between them. Her choice, her spoken defiance, had forged a new bond. Exhaustion finally claimed them. Elara sat huddled near Kanji, the silence no longer one of suspicion, but of shared understanding. He looked at her, his dark eyes no longer guarded, but holding a quiet intensity. He reached out, not to touch her, but to gently adjust the worn blanket around her shoulders, the same gesture he had made during the storm. This time, however, his fingers brushed her cheek, a fleeting contact, featherlight, yet it sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. She met his gaze, and for the first time, she offered him a small, tremulous smile. He didn't smile back, but the harsh lines around his mouth softened. In the deep twilight, with the sounds of the wilderness their only companions and the threat of her father's men a lingering shadow, Elara knew she was no longer truly alone. She had chosen her path, beside this silent warrior who had shown her the true meaning of protection, and in doing so, had helped her find a strength she never knew she possessed. The future was uncertain, perilous, but here, in this shared stillness, was a quiet promise of survival, and perhaps, something more. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, leave a like and subscribe for more.